I am a black man in America. I am a father. I am a grandfather. I am an uncle. I am compassionate. I am driven. I am committed. I am smart. I am inquisitive. I am concerned about the lives of others. And my life matters. The richness of our culture. I grew up in the 60s. The height of the civil rights movement was going on. And the music and the art and, you know, just the figures that came out of that time period, out of our struggle. And even though we were struggling, it made me very proud to be a part of this group, rising up to fight for something basic, you know, just the right to be, to live, you know, and free in a country where everybody else had, you know, had certain rights. But the music and the culture and the food and the family and, you know, the fellowship. You know, God has given me the opportunity to work with youth. And, you know, that's what I've done for the last 40, well, actually up until the present time. From the time where I was about 18 professionally to my present. I grew up with strong men around me that poured into me. And again, like I said, I grew up in the 60s and, you know, conscious in the early 70s. And that was the time where, you know, the Black Panthers was happening. King was doing his thing in the civil rights movement. Malcolm. The norm in that era was educate yourself, read, find out about who you are. There was a cultural awakening during that time. So I lived through and absorbed, you know, all of these things at a very young age, and I always hung out with older guys. So there was a group of older guys that I used to hang out with. We would play racquetball and, you know, we would do these certain things. And then we would take these trips. And on these trips, we would just talk about current events. We would talk about history and culture and, you know, just manhood, just, you know, what it is to be a man, what it is to be a family man. I was blessed to be employed at the community center. And I'm telling you, the director at that time was Theodore D. Young, and he came to me and he said, you know, I want you to be a part of this particular program because there's something in you that I see, and I think, you know, that the kids could benefit from, you know, from what you have. And that was Operations Crossroads. And I did that for 20 years, and I'm telling you, those were the most rewarding years of my life. You know, I mean, I've dealt with, you know, 300, 400 families of kids that have come through that program. I wanted to make sure that I gave them a good cultural foundation, because I believe, you know, just like your house sits on a foundation, I think a foundation is the genesis of everything that we do. You know, we're who we are because of the scripts that we've learned over the years in our head. You know, the way people have treated us, the way our parents talk to us, positive reinforcements that people around us have poured into us. That's what creates who we are. So I saw an opportunity to reach young people at the age of 14 at the crossroads of their life, where they could go one way or the other. I was that person who could say what the parents are saying, but because of my relationship with young people, they could hear it and receive it in a different way. You know, I would pour into them what I wanted to pour into my own son. You know, and it's so interesting. Even today, I get messages where, you know, people will reach out to me and say, you know, Mr. Lewis, when you said this to me when I was 14, it changed my life. And of course, I don't remember what I said, you know, but being in that mode and being in that mindset that I wanted to pour life into every child or every young person that I came across, it worked. What I try to do is anything that I receive that's positive, I try to pour it into anybody who will listen. You know, and over the years, I've been able to make a connection with particularly young people. And I think that's my calling. We have to be obedient to our calling. And in order for us to be obedient to our calling, we have to know what the calling is. And I believe mine was to reach young people. A topic that's pretty taboo. And I know me growing up, I grew up with people who, were dealing with serious trauma. If a black person in America is not angry every single day, and I'm paraphrasing them, it's by the grace of God. Just living as a person of color, in this environment is a mental health issue. And a family member was married to a guy who had returned from Vietnam. We know it as PTSD now, but they wasn't categorizing it back then as that. And plus the government didn't want to spend the money to to service these guys in terms of mental health. He came home and he abused. It was years and years and years and years of abuse. And it came because he was still dealing with the trauma of war. Around the 4th of July, he used to sleep under the bed because of the firecrackers and and that kind of thing. And any loud noise, he would wake up in a complete panic. Nobody wants to feel crazy, because I know talking about it, it's always like, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy. It's like, no, I'm not saying that you're crazy. What I'm saying is you've been through a very traumatic experience and you need to at least talk to somebody, or, this expression has to come out some way. And that's why I think, drug abuse is so prominent in our community. Alcoholism is so prominent in our community because people are trying to quiet the pain, in their head. The lack of people that are culturally sensitive in those professions, has played a factor in that as well. My grandmother used to always say, the idle mind is the playground of the devil. And, meaning that you should always fill your time with something. You should always be actively engaged in learning. Procrastination is the thief of time. I particularly was a procrastinator when I was growing up. Everything was last minute. I had a report due and I would do it the night before and stay up all night. Going to get that job or applying for that job, I would always used to wait till the last minute, the last day, before the deadline. Entrepreneur and procrastinator don't mix in terms of business. What I always used to tell my son is, don't procrastinate, number one. If you get something in your mind, man, make it happen. Do it. Don't be a talker, be a doer. With your ideas, with your health, anything that you do that you set your mind to, be intentional about it. And be on top of your game. Put in work every day. If you have an idle mind, you're going to get into things that you shouldn't get into. Period. If you waste your time not educating yourself, you're going to go down a dark hole. The other thing for my oldest son now, in terms of a father, I always tell him to be present. You got to be present, man. It's not about your financials. It's not about, you have to be mentally, spiritually, physically present in the life of your kids and and your wife. With my daughters, it's basically the same thing. It's like, guard your heart. You got to be ambitious. You got to be a go-getter. Go after what it is that you want. And most importantly, have compassion and love for others. I think that's what makes the world go round.